coordinate and it has a y coordinate. And when we find the midpoint, we're just taking 2 points, finding their average, or what's the middle of the x's and the middle of the y's. So for example, if we had the point 1, negative 3, and the point 3, 6, and we wanted to find the middle of those 2 points, we average the x's and average the y's. They have the formula up here. Okay, so the midpoint is x1 plus x2. Now the little 1 and little 2 just mean x from the first point, x from the second point. That doesn't mean you need to multiply by 2 or anything up here on your x's. Okay, so there's 2 x's, we add them, divide by 2, that gives us the average. So in our midpoint, we add the x's, so our first x from our first point was 1, the second x was 3, and we're going to divide that number by 2 to find the middle of 1 and 3. Okay, for the y's, we do the same thing. We take the y from the first point, which is negative 3, add the y from the second point, which was 6, and divide by 2. You do end up getting 2 values for your midpoint, an x and a y. Okay, so for the first one, 1 plus 3 is 4. Divided by 2 gives us 2. And for the second one, negative 3 plus 6 is 3 divided by 2. Some people leave that as 3 halves. Some people go ahead and divide that and make it 1.5 or 1.5. Okay, so that is how you find the midpoint when you are given the 2 endpoints. And we're going to do an example of that. But is there any question? Is there questions from anyone before we go and do another example? Okay, so let's try this one. The endpoints of segment EF are at negative 1, 5. So remember it's x, comma, y. And 4, negative 7. Again, x, comma, y. Find the coordinates of the midpoint of EF, so the middle of those 2 points. All right, so for our x's, what 2 numbers are we going to add on top of our fraction here? Very good. X from our first point right here was negative 1. X from the second point was 4. And we'll divide that by 2. All right, what about the y? We have to do the y's also. Okay, good. Y from the first point was 5, plus the y from the second point was negative 7. 5 plus negative 7 divided by 2. All right, let's finish those off. Negative 1 plus 4 gives us 3 over 2. And over here, 5 plus 7 gives us negative 2 over 2, which it just depends on the book, the teacher, the person, as to how you want to finish these out. 3 divided by 2 could give us, you could write that either as 1 and 1/2 or as 1.5, or you could leave it as 3/2. It just depends on the question and what they're asking for. Okay, are we still good? Midpoint's looking good to us? Okay, here's one more. I'll let you guys try this one out and let me know what you think the answer is. And this should say the midpoint of the segment AB. Okay, how's it going? We doing pretty good? Okay, we get 1 is 3, negative 2.5. Got one answer in there. Do you have any agreement on that or disagreement? Okay. right, so we're going to follow this formula up here. It says you take x1 plus x2, and again, what that means is, see how they gave us 2 points? 1, 2 points. x1 means the x from the first point, y1 is the y from the first point, x2 is the x from the second point, y2 is the y from the second point. So our answer will be a point, okay? It will be something, comma, something, because the midpoint is still a point. But we just have to find the average of our x's, so the middle of the 2 first coordinates and the middle of the 2 second coordinates. So in this formula, we're averaging them. We're adding them together and dividing by 2. But you have to take the x from each point and the y from each point. So we go x1, the x from the first point, plus x2. The x from the second point was 4. And then we're going to divide that by 2. Okay, then the y's, we have y1 plus y2, so the y from the first point was negative 4. The y from the second point was negative 1. We're going to add those, divide by 2. And then you just have to be really careful and make sure you do your math correctly. Okay, so then we go ahead and simplify these. So 2 plus 4 is 6. It's still divided by 2. Negative 4 plus negative 1 is negative 5, divided by 2. And then we finish this out. We go ahead and divide by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Negative 5 divided by 2 is negative 2.5. And you can use a calculator to do that part. That's completely okay. But the midpoint of the segment AB that goes from 2, negative 4 to 4, negative 1 is 3, negative 2.5. So does that make more sense? Did I clear up wherever the part that was confusing? Hopefully. Okay, does anyone still have questions? All right, let's try. It looks like we have one more example here. So let's try one more example. Oh, shoot, this is this is an unpleasant example. All right. So still, this is our x1 and our y1. Okay, so we have the segment AB. Its endpoints are 2x and 4y, and B, its endpoints are 10 and 22. So they enjoy throwing in some variables every now and again. So these are just pretend like they are numbers for now. Okay? And we do the formula the same way we do before. So let's add the coordinates from both points. So what would I put first over here? What am I going to add on top here? What 2 things would I add together? Yeah, and so they threw in that weird 2x, so that's what we have to use, is 2x. So we would put 2x plus 10 here. And we're still going to divide it by 2, because 2x was the coordinate from our first one, 10 was the coordinate from our second one. Okay, what are we going to add on the y part? What 2 things are we going to add together? Good, yep, this one had 4y for its first one, so that's what we write down, plus the second y was 22, and divide by 2. Now this is a little different. We can't add a 2x and a 10. One has an x and the other doesn't. So what we have to do is just kind of leave it how it is. The only thing we're going to do is divide each part by 2. So we're going to divide 2x divided by 2 is just 1x. Oh, yes, go ahead. That is correct. Okay, I'll split it this way. So you just split it up since we can't, good job, since we can't add x's and non-x's, we just split it in half and simplify each one. So we're going to simplify, divide each part by 2. So the first half, 2 divided by 2 gives me 1x, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. That's the whole first part. And over here, 4 divided by 2 gives me a 2y, and 22 divided by 2 gives me an 11. So I always love how they just throw one in there right when we're getting it. They throw one in that's a little crazy. But anytime we're finding the midpoint, okay, and you want to read these because we're going to change up here in just a second and find one of the end points instead of the midpoint. When you're asked to find the midpoint, this is the formula you use. So you'll want to write this down. For midpoint, you do x1 plus x2 divided by 2 for the first coordinate, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2 for the second coordinate. Okay, so if you don't have that written in your notes, I would write that down.